You're winning. You're winning. You're winning. You're winning. Well, hello, family. I told you I'd be right back. We have a double header this evening, and I am keeping the idea of healing energy happening tonight. But I have to say, I think this conversation is going to be so much fun and absolutely new to you. I expect to blow your mind. So write that down. I'm expecting to have my mind blown because I believe that everybody's focusing on healing these days, and some people are looking for spiritual ways of healing. But I cannot say that most people are looking towards a metaphysical way of healing. We are so often caught up in what our natural mindset can show us, and we're very evidence based these days. So, how does it all work? And why should we be looking perhaps to the mystics to give us answers? Well, I can share with you that my guest tonight has done her research and she has written several books that will provide you maybe some evidence-based answers to questions like why am I feeling jealous and envious? Why am I feeling so insecure? And can I really talk to my loved ones that have passed on? Sue Frederick is a numerologist. She is an intuitive coach. She is a ordained unity minister as well as a soul restoration therapist. So if anybody has their fingerprint on on the pulse of energy and what's going on in the metaphysical world, I think it might be her. Please join me in welcoming Sue Frederick. Welcome, Sue. How are you?
Oh, Coach Erica, you are so awesome. It's an honor to be here with you tonight.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. You know what? I came across you because I was seeking out information to how to make our dreams, um, help us grow. I was seeking out that information. But when I found you, not only did I find out that you had information about dreams, that you had information about soul restoration and how we could talk to our loved ones from heaven, I was just like, mind blown. But what really surprised me is that all of this non tangible work that we could do could actually help us with our tangible concerns, like even our career.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is true. In fact, my first book is called I See Your Dream Job, and it really was about helping people shift into what we can call the metaphysical view of career
Hmm.
rather than the everyday human story of career. Because I think everybody here has a story in their head that they've been told about what they have to do to make a living and how they have to get benefits and security and all these things. And that's a good human story. But I've worked with thousands of clients who followed all those rules, did all those things right, and then reached a point in their life where they said, if this is all there is, I want to check out because this is meaningless and stressful and exhausting, and often they come to me at that point, and or people like me, and I help them shift into what I like to call your divine lens view of life. So you have your human ego view over here, and that's what you're in
Hmm.
most of the time. All
Right.
of us here. And then with a deep breath, with meditation, with any kind of shifting of the energy, spiritual practice, we can lift up and begin to see it as a metaphysical soul journey. So what did you sign up to do for this lifetime? And could it be possible that every challenge you've had has been something your soul agreed to experience to help you grow and to help you step up to your great soul mission potential?
Wow. So I'm going to ask you just a wild question right off the bat. If someone ends up being a serial killer, how does that fit
Yeah.
with their soul energy? How does that
Yes.
work?
That's a really good question, because here's how I see it. We're all hanging out in the divine realms, and it's the mystical world beyond the physical, and whatever terms you want to put to that, whether you call it heaven or the divine realms or the woo-woo world, whatever you'd like to call it. We're all hanging out there, and we're souls, we're beings of light, and we're all connected. And we feel unconditional love there, like you cannot imagine. We can't feel it here. And we say, you know what, that earth realm down there, it needs a lot of help, because those people are, when they drop into that earth realm, they forget that their soul's on a journey, and they act like little ants just, pushing a piece of dirt up a hill, and they forget that there's a bigger picture, a bigger purpose. So who's willing to jump in down there and try to shift consciousness, try to wake up while you're on earth and remember that you're a soul on a journey? And so maybe, Erica, you raised your hand and said, okay, I'll go. And so the beings of light helped you approve your life plan. And they said, Erica, you're going to have some challenges along the way, and you may even choose a life that's going to give you right off the bat some challenges, because at every choice point, it's free will. And your soul either gets to go, you know what, I'm going to use my pain as fuel to make the world a better place, to open my heart, to live courageously, or I'm going to wallow in my pain and go down the negative path. So the serial killer may have come here to be a spiritual teacher for people, may have come here to be a healer, but the pain they experienced, probably young, because often it's our childhood pain that might have the greatest potential, to kind of, that we would choose free will to not look for the light in the midst of that pain. And that's totally understandable. And suddenly that serial killer is constantly making choices that take them further into the darkness, the hatred, the judgment, the discrimination, all the negativity of the human world. But, even at the last minute, that serial killer has a higher voice in their soul saying, remember who you are. You came here to love. You came here to be compassionate. Quiet the crazy monkey mind and open your heart. Trust your heart. So even at the last minute, that serial killer could choose to step into the light. It's never too late. But when we cross over, we review that life and we either go, oh, darn, I forgot that I'm a divine being who came there on purpose to do good work. Or we get to say, well, I did it. I kept trying. I kept looking for the light. I kept taking another breath and opening my heart.
So, like, Charles Manson could come back?
Oh, well, when we cross over, we have to go through some learning, because especially if we've had a very destructive life, if we've hurt a lot of people, the moment of crossing over, we're sort of held. Imagine watching a movie where you see how you've hurt people and feeling the pain you've caused people. That's what people call the soul review, but you're doing it with love. There's unconditional love around you, helping you understand it as a soul, so that you're not wounded by it, but you're learning, like, oh my gosh, what did I do? I want to help people now. And the beings probably go, well, I think you should spend some time in the divine realms helping out from here, rather than jumping right back in where you might forget again, But the other thing that's hard for the humans to understand here, including me, I'm human too, is that no matter how it works out, there is a divine order, a God the good, running this universe. You can call it God consciousness, you can call it divine order, whatever words you like. But even the serial killer is in some ways that we can't understand, learning what his soul came to learn. And there is a soul agreement happening with people, even who go through tragic events, that is somehow helping souls evolve. And that's a very hard thing for us to grasp here, because we just see the human side of it from here.
Mm. Wow. I mean, that is tough to navigate.
Yeah.
It really, really is, because what do you think, you know, how can I need to ask this question in connection with your history? So you are a numerologist, and matter of fact, you're a master numerologist, okay? And you believe that there's this soul agreement, and the way your numbers line up helps you understand what your soul agreement is.
Or just remember what you came here to do. And
What you-
again, it's free will if you want to
right.
step up to it or not.
Okay. So I'm trying to wonder, what might someone of that level of complexity might agree to come back as, or did they agree to experience that pain? Because you talked about how people agree to have certain lessons taught to them.
Yeah. And, I'll just speak for myself, because I don't want to pretend that I understand other people's journeys, because I don't. We're each just here trying to navigate a day at a time, a breath at a time in this physical world. But, I was born in a family where I thought and looked at the world differently from all of them. And I was very intuitive as a kid and very sensitive. And nowadays you might call that being an empath. But when I was growing up, I was called a lot of other names for being
Really?
sensitive,
Okay.
for crying. I was pretty much the weird kid. And in my family, I mean, that was the thing. My own mother didn't like me, So, but I agreed to that. This is how I view it now. That when I finally left home at 17 and was out on my own, that was the best moment for me, because then I got to start making choices from my soul. And my soul always wanted to understand how life works. Always. I always had that question, like, why is this person behaving that way? Why is that person behaving that way? Is my family of origin crazy? Like, I had all of those kinds of questions. And so I got a degree in psychology, but I also was always studying really outlying spirituality. What I mean is theosophy, Native American spirituality, Buddhism, Hinduism. I grew up Catholic. You name a path and I've studied it, because I was really trying to understand, is there a God being, and what role do they play in this human story? Why would they let good people suffer? And my beautiful young husband, Paul, the most beautiful, loving, sweet man I've ever known, a mountain climber with me in our 20s, he died a terrible, suffering death of colon cancer when I was 29. He died in my arms. So I had that question of, why do good people suffer if there's a God? And
Right.
psychology can't touch those questions, honestly. Yet
Mhm.
spiritual exploration can begin to give you ideas that, if you're ready to explore them, you might find that they resonate as true for you.
Mm. So, what things since you've studied so many religions, what things can you give us about the commonality of that?
Oh, yeah, that's the beautiful question. And, going to ministry school, those were my favorite classes, studying all the religions through history. And they all have such beautiful elements in them. They really do. And the common element is that there's a higher being, a higher presence, whatever word you put to that. And it's called God or Buddha or Jesus or many other titles, but it's a loving divine presence that is here helping us live this life, and that we're supposed to be living a good life, even though that's defined differently by different religious paths. And that there's a divine presence guiding everything. Number two, we're supposed to be living a good life, however that's defined by your religion. And number three, we are required to have some kind of spiritual practice, whether you call that prayer, meditation, whatever it is in your tradition that works for you, that helps you lift up above this physical world and view it from the higher divine perspective. So I use a combination of meditation, of calling in the light, of affirmative prayer. I even grew up Catholic, so I'll still say the Our Father, whatever calls in the light and helps lift you above your human story to give you that wiser, more loving, compassionate perspective is the spiritual practice that you need.
So what about things like mental illness? Like you talk about free will. What if you can't find your will?
I know, and that is true. I've studied psychology, and I do know that there is some, and the way I see it is probably not gonna, a lot of people won't agree with, but whatever our body does, like we choose our body with its weaknesses and its strengths and its challenges before we come in. And I came in with great sensitivity and I would say extreme emotional intuition that would make me laugh and cry in the same hour, right? And yet, if I learn to keep trying to lift that into the light, it helps me and I don't get lost in my pain. And yet some people choose to have a mental illness, but I like to just call it an emotional challenge illness that teaches them a different way to navigate, that somehow in ways we don't understand, they are learning what their soul came to learn, no matter how painful it might look on the outside. I just worked with a client whose child was brain injured at birth. And this child, the mother was told that this child would never talk, probably didn't have a functioning mind. And this mother loved on her child so much and had such pure intuitive communication with him. He lived up until he was around 12, and he was a pure being of light, just loving and filled with light all the time. We look at that from the outside as a terrible tragedy, but he was an absolute heart being of light. And anyone who could see past the physical could see that and feel that in him. And he was the joy of her life. And he still is. He communicates with her from the divine. And she chooses not to see it as a tragedy. And she sees it that her beautiful son is and always will be her greatest love and her greatest teacher. And that's her choice, her beautiful free will choice to see it that way. And that lifts her up to live her best, most productive, helping, healing, compassionate life. Everybody has a choice.
That is amazing. I want us to bookmark parents who've lost their children, because I want to go back to that. But I do want to tackle this last question about mental health and kind of the challenges of understanding, the energy and the mystic mind as it relates to things such as this. 𝒊𝒂𝒕 says, what about sociopaths who lack empathy? So how can we think about that?
Well, we do walk through this world with one foot in the human realm and one foot in the divine. And yes, I mean, we can look at we can look at people struggling with things, but we're never going to know what their soul journey is. And that's one of the things. We can't look at people and say, oh, well, that person looks like they have it all figured out and they have a great life, or that person looks crazy and horrible. We can't see what they're learning. We can't see their heart. We can't see what their soul journey is. And we have to stop really judging each other and just say, I'm going to try to live with love and compassion no matter who I bump up against and no matter what happens in this world. And that's a very hard but very courageous choice. And let's just say we're in a room where there is someone threatening us. You know, I would hope that if I find myself in that position, that somehow I can pour light and love on that person and maybe even help change the situation for the better, rather than instantly judge it and have worse things happen. And I know that's a terrible thing to say. I don't mean in any way to say that anybody's done anything wrong if they haven't reacted that way, but I'm just saying, what if we could? What if in our moment of greatest fear in a terrible situation, we could somehow love on that person instead? Could we change it? Could we change the energy of it? I think it's a question worth asking.
It's really a few tough pills to swallow, but maybe we can somehow get there. I can say. I wanted to highlight the parents, but I first want to talk about numerology and what is it?
So when my beautiful young husband died, and I was angry at God, and I didn't understand why a beautiful, loving person would suffer, because he suffered terribly for a year. And then my best girlfriend died the next year of leukemia, and she had been my childhood girlfriend. So I really wanted to know, why is there suffering? You know, what's the problem here? What is Earth? Why is Earth so messed up here? And I was gifted a session with a numerologist, and she said, look, I don't know if you'll like any of this stuff, but give it a try and see if it helps. And this numerologist showed me my soul path, which is called the 22 Soul Journey, here to help shift consciousness and come up with new ways of thinking and viewing the world. And I heard that and I went, what? I can't pay the rent and I'm grieving. What the heck are you talking about? You know? And they showed, the numerologist told me I was in a 9 personal year, a year of surrender, of letting go and trying to let that pain just move through me and not hold on to it. And she said a lot of things like that. And she told me my soul agreement with beautiful Paul was the number 9 again, which is a 9 of completion and surrender. And it was not an agreement that we would live happily ever after with a family, you know, that we had a different soul agreement that we had made. And when I heard it, even though I'd been seeing a therapist, a grief therapist, and working with hospice and all these other things, and that numerology session really helped me. And it was 1980, so I had no idea how to study it. There was no internet, you know, so I was going to stores and libraries and trying to find books on numerology and learn. And I made my own notebook, and I would get everybody's birth date that I knew, and I would figure out their path and their personal year cycles. And so from 1980 on, I've been studying that. And then I, of course, read books and studied with teachers and just went on and on with it. And then I would take friends out to dinner, because I ended up working as a magazine editor and magazine writer. And I would take friends out to dinner, and they'd say, oh, would you do my numerology chart? You know, and I would, and they would go, oh, that's so great. But I never thought, gosh, I should make a living out of this. I mean, it was the 80s. Nobody did something like that. But I had a very successful career as a health writer for a long time. And I believed I was doing good by helping people live a healthy life, because so many people I love had died of cancer. And by the time I was 35, I'd lost 5 of my beloved, my age people to cancer. And so numerology started to help me make sense of things. But it wasn't until I'd been a journalist, and it was 1998 or 99 when I had sort of a dark night of the soul. And I said, you know what, I can't write another story about vitamin C. I really have to write my soul's truth. And I'd been studying spirituality and studying unity and Course in Miracles and so many things. And I finally put it all together. And I think we all have these moments where it finally just comes together for us. And I was a single mom, and I said, you know what, I'm going to make my living doing intuitive numerology sessions with people, helping them with career, helping them with grief. And everybody around me said, that won't work. You can't pay
Yeah.
the mortgage with that, But my soul, my intuition said, it's that or nothing. I got to do what's in my heart. And because I was a single mom, I gave it my heart and soul. And that's the advice I give to anyone when you're in that moment that you're shifting into your true work. You can't just dabble in it, keep that job you hate that you come home exhausted from every day and then try to do your work, because it needs your whole presence, your whole focus. And because I was all in, I talked for free wherever they would have me, from the library to, a business a networking meeting. And I would talk about intuition and soul missions. And I would have a workshop in my house on Saturday mornings for people. And with that pure passion, and I'm a writer, so I would write about it. It just worked, people resonated with it. And I suddenly had clients, and I was teaching classes, and the magic happens when we're all in and we don't hold back.
Amazing. I love it. So, how does one find their soul agreement? How does that,
Well, there's many different ways. It's not just numerology. I mean, we can all just tune in and quiet the mind and open the heart and use our intuition, and we know, but we can get affirmation and confirmation by things like astrology, or even just conventional career tests. Like in my early 20s, I was a conventional career counselor at University of Missouri while I was a student there. I think it's so funny looking back on it, because I was taught to give all these very traditional career tests, and meanwhile, when the person walked in, I would kind of look at them and talk to them and feel it out. And I'd say, oh, this is what I think you'd like. And I'd bring them over to that section of the thing. And then we go through the whole battery of tests, and it brought them over to the same place, because that intuition that we all have can always tell us. And so you can go take all those career tests, or you can look at your numerology path, or your astrology information, or your own intuition, or your conversation with God. Whatever works for you, there is an answer, because you did come here with a great soul mission that is meant to be your great work.
Well, I hope that we could all kind of use this information that you've given us to start going down the path of finding our soul mission. So, how many times have you heard said that if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life, right?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? I mean, when you are doing your heart and soul's work, yeah, it's going to be hard. It's, you're going to have to work long hours. But if you're loving it, if it's what lights you up, then it's such a different vibe. It's such a different energy than going to a job where you just feel your soul sucking away all day long, and you come home exhausted. And so then maybe you have to have a bottle of wine to get unwind or something. But the problem is, I believe, we dropped into this physical world to do something great, each of us in our own unique way. And if we can get in touch with what that is and quit listening to what the world tells us we should be doing, we can have that fulfilling, happy work and be financially successful. And that's the piece people think, oh, well, I can't do what I love and have own a car and a home. Yes, you can, but you have to go at it with your passion and your heart and your soul. You have to make it work as if you're a single mom and you're not going to let your kids down. And if you give it that, it will work.
Do you think this works for people anywhere in the world? Like if I was, in India and resources were not fruitful to me. I mean,
No, it's different cultures have different challenges with trying, even the cultural norm of what women are even allowed to do in some places.
Mhm.
So yes, you're right. I mean, in the Western world, we are very uh, spoiled, I guess I could say, by the fact that, yes, I could decide overnight that I was going to launch this business and work with clients and I could go out and make it happen. Whereas if I had been a woman in India, probably wouldn't have even been in my, ballpark to be able to think of it. And yet I work with clients in other parts of the world, and they each do have little moments in their life that, like, for example, one of my clients in India loved cooking. And
Mhm.
so by talking with her and working with her, she found a way to sell this certain kind of food that she loved so much on the side at first, because that's all she was allowed to do. But it became
Mhm.
so successful that she was able to really get her whole village involved and make it
Oh, wow.
work. And so there's a little magic everywhere for everyone. It's just about asking for higher guidance, asking for that help from the divine. It's kind of
Mhm.
like saying, I have this problem in front of me and my human mind can't solve it. Please, divine spirits, please, God, please, departed loved ones, whoever it is, lift me up to show me the way forward. And that prayer is always answered.
Mm. That's pretty powerful. Speaking of the power of doing this, you and I have shared some stories that asking for this help from the divine, from the metaphysical world, can help heal pain that we feel on earth. And one of the greatest pains that everyone, speaks of is when they lose a child.
Yeah, absolutely. And that those are the clients I love more than those grieving parents are the highly evolved souls of our planet. I truly believe,
Mm.
because they, the way we see it, because I'm let me just give a good shout out to helpingparentsheal.org. This is an organization started long ago by Elizabeth Boisson, and you can just Google helpingparentsheal.org. It's a nonprofit foundation. She launched it because she lost a baby when she was when in around 2000 and, oh, I'm bad with numbers, when anyway in her 20s. And then she had a beautiful son who, when he was 19, he was on a college trip to Nepal and he died of altitude sickness at the base camp of Everest. And she felt him hug her physically at the moment that he was crossing over on Everest, and she was home in Arizona. And in that moment, she knew that his soul continued, and she wanted to move through her grief in a way that helped other grieving parents embrace the possibility that their departed child lived on in spirit and could and would communicate with them. And so she started this nonprofit. And any of you who are grieving can go visit this website, helpingparentsheal.org, and find numerous free services, whether it's videos of different teachers or people speaking about these things, or caring listeners who will talk to you for free to help you navigate your grief, and many books written by some of these parents. And there are now, I'm not sure the numbers, but I think it's like 20,000 parents who are part of this international organization. And they get together for meetings almost every day. They have video meetings and
Oh.
constant, yeah, and constant conversation. And then she had a huge Helping Parents Heal conference in Arizona in August.
Mhm.
900 grieving parents were there. And every one of them will tell you that their departed child has come back to them in numerous ways to tell them, Mom, don't waste your time in bed. I'm good. I'm free. I'm in the happy divine realms. You're there in the hard place, the earth school. and I'm watching you. So get up, be happy, make your life good. And they get those messages and they start finding a way in their own life to turn their pain into something meaningful that helps others.
So, do you believe that we can readily talk to our loved ones?
Yes,
Just like
we just
when we're
we
ready.
all
When we're
can. Yeah,
ready.
I mean, I hate this idea that culture has that only special people can be intuitive or psychic. That isn't true. We each have a left brain, which is our logic, linear mind that we need to navigate down here. And we have our right brain, our intuitive, creative, right brain God self, I call it, that has higher connection to the divine, always has a channel of wisdom pouring through and can connect to the highest realms and
Mm-hmm.
communicate. And when my husband Paul died, he was so insistent on showing me that he lived on. Like he
Mm-hmm.
died in my arms, and that was a magical story. I write about it in all of my books. And he woke me up. I was asleep on the floor of the hospital because I was exhausted. He'd been in a coma for a couple days, and he came to me in a dream and said, "What are you doing? You told me I could die in your arms. Get up, come to the bedside and hold me." He said, "I'm not stuck in that body. I'm free. Come hold me." And I woke up from this on the hospital floor, and all of our friends were in the room. And I sent everybody out except for Paul's mom. And I said, "Paul came to me and told me he's ready to go. He's waiting for us to get it together, and his breathing
Wow.
changed. His breathing hadn't changed in 24 hours. It was that terrible coma breathing that is so torturous to listen to. And
Mhm.
so his mom stood on one side and I stood on the other. And we both held Paul and we said, "You're free to go, baby. We love you. We'll be fine. Your spirit is free to go. Go out and play in those beautiful mountains." And I saw his spirit lift up and move out the window. And then that night in bed, I was in a dream vision state. I was asleep, and I felt Paul in bed cuddling with me. I felt his body completely up against me, holding me, cuddling. And then this being of light reached over me and tapped him, and he lifted up because the spirits aren't allowed. I mean, if they stayed with us, they wouldn't be moving on. And so there's often a spirit guide that will help your loved one keep moving, like you're not going to stay there and haunt her for the rest of your life. And so Paul disappeared, but he would come back again and again. And he would even tell me all the things he was learning, that were so cool. Like at one point he said, "There's no suffering." And I was like, "What are you talking about? There's terrible suffering." And he goes, "No, from the soul's point of view, the soul never suffers. It's just the body, and that's temporary." And he showed me that. And I
Mhm.
feel like he's been my spiritual teacher now for decades because he keeps coming back and giving me all this important information. And so I feel very blessed by all the losses because they've all been such amazing teachers to me.
Mhm. What if there was an encounter where a spirit said that they were angry? What what would you receive
There,
from them?
well, there are lost souls. You can look at any spiritual tradition from Catholicism to Hindu. The Hindus call it the realm of the hungry ghost, which is the lower astral realm. So when we leave our body and cross, even if we're in our dream at night and we're slipping out into the divine for those kinds of dreams where we really travel and where we connect to our loved ones, our departed, we've all had those if we can remember them when we wake up. But there's a lower astral realm that every tradition talks about and names it something different, where if a soul does not kind of look for the light or call out to God or even ignores the people who come to help them and try to lift them up, they can get stuck in this kind of mucky muck. You can almost think of it as like a foggy, heavy, dense ether between this reality and the higher God consciousness realms.
Mhm.
And when we normally cross, we have loved ones, a team that come and lift us up and call us with love. But if for some reason we're just sort of angry and shut down and we can't lift up, we might kind of linger there for a bit, but there's always spirit guides trying to help us from there. But if we linger there, we might become that, like the haunted, you go to a haunted house and you feel a certain kind of maybe angry presence. And so that requires a spiritual healer to help that soul move to the light. And by sending them love and prayer, not anger or fear, we can even help them lift up and move into the higher realms.
So, what experience have you had to make you understand that there are, a group of people waiting on us? What does that come from?
Oh, it comes from beautiful traditions, but in metaphysics, but it also comes from my own personal experience. And I do soul regression sessions with clients where we go and I guide them through a meditation, and we lift up above the physical, and then we move into the divine realms and meet our spirit guides. And I've done this with so many clients, and so many other people like me have done this with thousands of clients. And it's amazing how the client will see a very similar thing, no matter their history, no matter what they believe in. They see angels or beings of light coming towards to lift them up, to answer their questions, to comfort them, to love them. And nobody ever dies alone. I mean, maybe the physical world looks like we're alone, but there are departed loved ones, soul posse, spirit guide, angels, always
Soul
around.
posse. I love it when you say that.
Yes. And right now, my dad is one of my primary guides on the other side, because he crossed in 1997, and he was such a soul agreement, so important in my soul posse. He was my loving family member, and he still comes to me like on certain issues that I really need help with. I'll get a certain vision of him in the corner of my eye, or I'll get a certain scent that I know is him, or even in a dream, he'll come through very vividly and have a conversation with me. We all have this, but we have to trust it. That's the thing, because most of the time our cynical mind will come in and go, oh, I was making that up, or that was a weird dream, or that was a coincidence. And that's the cynical left brain logic mind. You can choose to just go that way, or you can say, well, my intuition is saying that's real, and let me lean into that and see where that takes me.
So, we think of like our family members, people talk about, oh, I feel my grandma and things of that nature. And I've even had experience where I have felt um, a loved one near me. But then that makes me also think about people who maybe have been adopted, or maybe you're estranged from part of your family. And so I have that experience as well. How does that work? And does that just
I want to talk about adoption, because adoption is a pure soul agreement. I'm sorry, it's not a random thing. So in other words, if we look at life as souls and not physical beings, you may have chosen the challenge of being born to a certain kind of birth parents because you needed maybe the genetics or something they were going to provide. And yet your real family, perhaps the family of your soul posse, your heart, are the people who adopted you. There's not random things.
So let's go down that realm. But I want to ask the back half of that question, or like, and it may be all in one the same. So you find yourself in the situation where you're abandoned by one of your parents, or that your parents' side of the family, and just to walk through history where this has occurred in so many different ways, to whether maybe you're born to a parent and they put you in the trash, something that feels really physically gut wrenching, like that, or you're left on the side of the road, or you're banded by the father or mother says, leaves the marriage, and they don't want to raise that child. Something happens to where you don't get to know that part of the family, or even in slave times where families were completely
Right.
ripped
Mhm.
apart. Um,
Well, there's so many ways to address that, but everything, when you think of your soul posse, it means the souls you've incarnated with for many lifetimes, whether you're with them through the whole lifetime or not. When you cross, they are your soul posse, your people. So, for example, I have a group of people that I've been in lifetimes with, and sometimes I've been their father, their mother, or they've been my father or my mother or my lover or my child. And we play different roles to learn different things: compassion, forgiveness, love, all sorts of things. And so when we view it from the human story, it can seem pointless and tragic and like, why keep living? This is so horrible. But in a moment of prayer and meditation, we might ask a question like, if it's true that my soul may have chosen this circumstance for me to learn and grow, not for punishment, but because I'm an old soul and I'm here to learn and grow and do something great with my life, what might that be? Like, what is my soul trying to learn in this moment of pain? And I can tell you that everything is almost reversed from how it appears here. So somebody who you might think is just um, not being successful, or something in their physical life, is probably a brilliant, beautiful old soul who just came to share some love and some wisdom in their own way. And they are doing great. They're a rock star spiritually. And yet they might be homeless. They might be, impoverished. And the people who seem to be wealthy and successful and maybe politicians or whatever, or celebrities, they are simply learning a lesson of, how am I using my power? Am I abusing it? Because a whole lot of them make that mistake. Once they get power and wealth, they forget that the lesson is to empower others with that,
mm,
to be
the
good,
last
to use
shall be first,
compassion.
and the first shall be last.
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly. And the
mhm.
Native Americans even had that philosophy. They were such evolved souls. And when we came along and were just, destroying them, I have a Native American healer that worked with Paul, Chief Fool's Crow, who I got to meet. He was alive back in the 80s. And he's actually come back to me as a spirit guide and talked to me. But, and that's an amazing story I can't even go into, but he helped Paul cross
Oh, really?
spiritually when Paul was dying. Yeah. I'll come back to that if you want to talk about it. But he's told me nothing is as it appears. So the Native Americans were the highly evolved souls. And the white man who came in and destroyed their culture were the babies. And they were trying to learn, and they're still here messing it up and trying to learn. And so
Mm.
if you really can flip it and for a moment look at it that way, what is your soul learning? What did you come to share? How can you turn your pain into love, into helping others, into compassion? And if you can even for a moment consider that, then you're on your path.
So, one of the things that we focus on here at Epic Understanding, because we're a very curious group, is the connection between adverse childhood experiences, um, and how we navigate our lives. As a matter of fact, we partner with a group called ACEs Matter, and they are just phenomenal. And what they do is they go out in the community, and they share stories and try to help people understand their and grow from their adverse childhood
Yeah.
experiences. Okay. That said, how would you explain your soul journey and your soul posse? How would that connect? Can you connect
So
those dots for us?
imagine if you're hanging out in the divine realms and planning a lifetime, and you say, well, for example, I think this is what I think actually I've had a vision that this is what I did. I was hanging out in the divine realms and I noticed that all of my Soul Posse were kind of growing and evolving faster than me. And I was kind of falling behind because I hadn't really been paying attention. I'd been slacking off when I'd come down here, and in fact, I know that I was an Apache warrior in a lifetime. And so I was actually killing people, and
No.
so when you get back to the divine realms, you start thinking, gosh, I just feel I really want to do some good down there. And so you might have a conversation with your guide and go, so what's the way I can drop in down there and really be sure that I wake up and remember to have a purposeful, good life and do good things, do good works. The journey of Jesus, to come to earth and suffer and be outcast, and yet remember that you're here to teach love and compassion. Jesus accomplished that. He's our way shower. And so, when we look at life that way and we say, imagine the spirit guides and everybody going, well, there's only one way down there that gives you a real opportunity to wake up and make you ask questions and dig deep. And you go, oh, what is it? And they say, grief and heartache and struggle. And you go, oh, really? And they say, yeah. Are you brave enough? Are you serious? And so if you say yes to that, you drop into a pretty challenging childhood even. And yet every moment of that, again, we go back to free will. If your pain is too great and you can't rise above it, that's okay. Let's look at it with compassion and love and forgiveness. But if you have that moment where you're able to turn it into your gold fuel to do good work in the world, if you can manage that, then you're a rock star. You're like Jesus. You're able to go out and turn your pain into fuel and help others.
It's very interesting. You said that you were an Apache, or what were you in the past? What did you say?
Apache warrior.
An Apache warrior. So that leads me into this idea that you are a soul regression therapist. So tell us how you became a soul regression therapist, and how did you find out you were an Apache warrior? How does that work?
So first, let me tell you, back in my 20s, it was the 70s. And so we explored these things in the 70s. I know you guys probably
I gotta find out, were you on PCP at the time?
No, I couldn't do drugs. Back then I remember I told you I'm an empath. I mean,
okay.
Couldn't do it. I tried. All my friends were doing drugs, but I just.
Exactly. Well, that's what I said. You said you were. It was the 70s.
Yeah. So
I had to, as you have to ask these questions.
Here's my story. Every weekend, all my friends pretty much would drop acid. It was the 70s, So one day, and I knew I was really sensitive because I was very, back then, very thin, especially, and very emotional and kind of shaky all the time. It was just a weird body type of an empath and not solid. I guess that's how you'd say it. Not really solid and grounded, right? So I was always trying to get solid and grounded here on earth. And so a friend of mine said, oh, come on, Sue, just do like a half tab of this acid with us and we'll be with you all night and we'll kind of talk you through it. And so I said yes. And I had a total God experience, which is what very sensitive people can do, where I was just walking around going, oh, it's so beautiful. It's all love. And we were out on a sidewalk in a downtown city, and there were all these cars going by really quickly. And the lights of the cars appeared to me as God light. And I was like, oh, it's so beautiful. And I started walking out into the street for God, not to die. I wasn't trying to commit suicide.
Wow.
And my friend Marv was like pulling me back, going, no more acid for you, Sue.
Oh my goodness. Maybe now that's why we know why people do that.
Is. I mean, that's the other thing. We judge somebody overdosing like that and say, oh, they tried to kill themselves or something. You don't know what they were experiencing. I just worked with a mom whose 16-year-old son took what is known on the internet as a God dose of mushrooms. I don't want to encourage this, I don't want to encourage it, but she tells this story. It's her story. And so she shares it with the world. So I can share it. I think that he was at home. He was 16. He was a beautiful boy. So amazing. Carried such a light around him. He wanted to experience what it would be like to take this many mushrooms. And he thought, oh, I'll do it and I'll have a great experience and I'll go tell my friends the next day and I'll be cool, you know? So he did it and he became incoherent, and his parents somehow were checked in on him or something, and he couldn't speak, but all he could, no, he could speak. And he said, it's God. It's all about love. I understand it all now. And they were like, great, honey, we're taking you to the ER, you know, because he was practically passing out. And they went to, putting on their clothes. It was the middle of the night to try to drive him to the ER. And he broke out of their arms and ran. And he said, I understand it all now. And he jumped off the balcony and he died. But his mother says, and his father says, that he was in the pure bliss of saying, it's all God, it's all love. I understand it now. That those were his last words. So I don't encourage this, but we never know. We never know what another person's journey is.
You're right. We never, ever, ever know. But that still hurts. That it hurts to hear that story, but
very painful. And his mom, of course, and his dad, they grieve their hearts out. And then when they have their moment, 1 foot in the human, 1 foot in the divine, they again are doing great work, starting nonprofits, doing all kinds of amazing work. In fact, they create video games, and they're creating this technology that they hope is going to help people connect to their departed loved ones. So that's another conversation.
What kind of technology might that be? Yeah, I'm like curious now, what kind of technology might that be?
Well, they had already been working on these lights that they could rig up that had to do with video games. I don't understand video games. Sorry, I'm too old, but somehow they had made this electronic thing happen where you could have lights show up in your bedroom, for example, and have this video game thing happening. And when their son crossed, they were lying in his bedroom the next day crying and grieving. And those lights started to come on when they weren't programmed to come on.
Oh, wow.
And they knew that it was their son telling them that he was okay. So now the father is really working on trying to develop a technology like that, where you can sit in a room and try to have a spirit communication through lights, you know? I mean, why not? Why aren't we pushing the forefront of trying to understand how do we communicate with spirits who've left the physical world?
This stuff, like I said, I said that Sue was going to blow your not mind. We are here this evening with Sue Frederick, and she's blowing our mind with the things that are going on in the metaphysical universe, the metaphysical realm. We've talked about a gamut of things from career to soul regression. You are welcome to start asking your questions. I'm anxious to hear what's on your mind, but as you can see, I'm coming up with the questions that are just popping out of my heart and my mind. I'm curious to know where does one get training to become a
I'm glad you asked.
therapist?
I meant to talk about that because I want to give a shout out to where I took my training. You can Google the Raven Heart Center, RAVENHEART. I think it's ravenheart.com. And Dr. Linda Bachman, she was a clinical psychologist for like 30 years, PhD, everything, and treated patients with the normal psychology approaches. And then her practice partner, her psychologist who shared her practice with her, he died young, died suddenly in his 40s. And he started coming back and communicating with her. And she had been, up until then, when a client would come in and go, I'm seeing my dead husband, she would say, would you like some medication for that? Because that's how psychology deals with that. And she said when it started to happen to her, she knew it was real. Like she was telling her husband, who was also a psychologist, he is here in the room and this is what he told me. And her husband believed it because he was having some similar, because he was good friends with him too. And it began sending Dr. Bachman on this whole searching journey to figure out how could this be possible. And she, study quantum physics. If you study, go visit the website of Dr. Gary Schwartz, for example, who does research on how to measure electromagnetic spirits outside of the body. There is this science to it. So Dr. Linda Bachman said, well, I'm going to go study with the original teacher of soul regression therapy, where you put person in a deep state of relaxation and guide them in a past lifetime and help them make meaning out of it. And she worked with him, Dr. Michael Newton, for a long time. She was his assistant. And then she began doing it with her own clients. And now she trains therapists to do it, or anyone can do her training. And she's phenomenal because she's a clinical psychologist. So it's not woo-woo. She has it all very scientifically laid out that we have to go into our theta brain waves in order to lift up from the human point of view and begin to see things in a higher perspective. And go do the research. This stuff, I'm not making it up.
It's amazing. Well, you've got some interest here. We have a question from one of our listeners. Hi, Robert. How are you? Welcome. Robert, I think you have yourself on mute. So when you unmute that, you can go ahead and ask.
Sorry about that. My bad.
Okay. That's okay. Go ahead.
Good. Just hello, Coach and Sue. Nice to meet you. Bubbly smile makes everybody smile.
Yeah. Thank you.
A couple things I'd like to touch upon. This last one has me a little intrigued. Considering what I know, have you heard about Elon Musk's Neuralink?
I've heard a little, like the headline of that. I haven't looked into it. Tell us.
Well, I don't know the technical side of it, but I can tell you the theoretical side of it. He actually wants to come out with a smartphone that somebody is speech incapable or immobile or anything like that. They will actually be able to think to their phone and send you messages or call you just by their mind.
Yeah, I have heard of that technology, and I think it's actually progressing. I mean, I don't know the state.
He plans on introducing it next year.
Yeah, there you go. I think that's going to be phenomenal.
Ooh.
And I'll also say there are scientists like Dr. Gary Schwartz who are researching a similar idea of using a phone to communicate with spirits on the other side. So that's pretty amazing.
Physics doesn't rule anything out when it comes to that. So I can't say yes nor no.
And quantum physics says that, energy never dies. It continues.
Correct. You can neither create nor destroy information or energy. It only changes form.
That's exactly right. And the other thing quantum physics teaches us is that time and space are happening all at once. It's not linear. And our minds here on Earth can only think of it as linear. So when you think, well, what if my loved one has moved on to another lifetime or something, it doesn't matter. Time and space is happening at once. Their soul can also come and help you when you need help or give you guidance. Or if you call out and say, I'm really struggling with this, can you give me insight? The people who love you, it doesn't matter if they're in their body or in their spirit, they're going to come and help you. That's the divine order of this God, the good universe.
Can you come help yourself? Can your older self come help your present self?
Such a great question, Erica. I love that question. I think you should research that.
I'm far, far, far from an expert
I
on
bet
this
it's true,
matter.
though. I bet we all have this part of us that is extremely highly evolved, very, a Jesus Buddha type highly evolved part of us. And that if we could call on that to make our decisions for us in life, we would do much better down here.
That's true. You know what? I am good at being curious. That's
That's right.
I'll reserve comment.
What did you say, Robert?
I said I'll reserve comment.
Oh. Are you good at being curious, Robert?
Oh, absolutely.
I think
To a
so.
fault.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. What was your next question?
Well, to delve into maybe her expertise on this, could you explain numerology a little better?
Oh, yeah. Imagine that your soul, well, first of all, Pythagoras, the guy who created our entire number system way back in 600 BC, he was a spiritual teacher and he created a whole school of enlightenment. And this is Pythagoras, the guy that we grew up hearing about in math class. Nobody ever said, well, by the way, he also said that numbers are not just a representation of quantity, but they have a different and energetic meaning as well. And even in the Bible and in so many spiritual traditions, they talk about the meaning of numbers. You know, the 12 apostles, 12 is a very sacred number in certain Christianity Bible stuff. But in numerology, every number has a certain vibration to it. And that the soul chooses the exact moment of birth, not even if it's a cesarean, the soul of that child is planning that exact moment, moving the calendar of the doctor and the calendar of the mother to the perfect moment that the soul needs to come into energetically for their lifetime to unfold in the way they're trying to learn. And so that will be reflected in your date of birth, day, month, and year, all those numbers, and in your astrological configuration. And if we put all of that together and look at it as a whole gestalt, we get a feeling. For me, it's like I figure out your chart. If you're my client, I do your birth date, I do your numbers, and then I meditate before the session starts. I put my hand on it and I go, please, divine guides, please, God, give me the words to say to help the soul move forward and understand their path. And I'll just get this download and I write it all down about their beautiful potential, their soul, and how to move forward. And it's reflected in the numbers of their soul mission. And you can read any of my books and learn how to figure that out. For example, Bridges to Heaven, True Stories of Loved Ones on the Other Side, I See Your Dream Job, I See Your Soulmate. Get any of those on Amazon. They explain how to digit it down and figure out your path. And then so you can learn that from it. You can also learn where you are in those 9-year reinvention cycles that we were talking about. That's such an amazing thing. I've taught workshops where, if you can imagine, there's 100 people all mapping out their lifetimes according to these 9-year cycles and sharing with each other. Wow, when that 9-year happened, that's when I went bankrupt and divorced, and I had no idea it was a 9-year. And look, it was a huge reinvention point. And now I look back on it and I'm so grateful that happened, because my life is so much different and better. And we can see every turning point, every painful moment from that higher, bigger perspective of the 9-year reinvention cycles that are always kicking us up to the next level. But of course, we have to release and surrender at the end of a cycle and then start in a slightly new direction at the beginning of a new cycle. So the numbers tell us so much.
So just so that we can be clear, there's a bunch of different numbers going on. Every person has a 9-year cycle in itself, 1 through 9.
But they start at different times depending on the path you're on. And that's easier to read about than to explain.
Right. And then we all have numbers that we're born into. Like I could be a 9. Robert can be a 1. You could be a 5. We could all be different numbers. But then there are... So that's our soul number.
Yeah.
But there are also master numbers, and those are 11, 22, and 33.
Yeah.
Right,
And
right.
I also want to say that it's not linear and it's not simple. So, for example, the 9-path soul who chooses that life, it is a culmination of everything they've learned in their lives. They're trying to put together and step into their wisdom, their compassion, their forgiveness, in spite of loss and pain and heartache and disappointment. So it's all of these things mixed in there that give you your free will. So you could be a very angry, negative, bitter 9-path soul, or you have a radio show called Coach Love and you're helping people.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. So, let's go back to this idea of free will.
Mm-hmm.
We don't lose our free will on the other side.
No, and it's so complex. We want to make everything black and white. We are souls that are filled with love and light. We come here to do amazing, wonderful things, and yet we're also here to learn. So if we just dropped in here and just were wonderful all the time, that's like the divine realms. What are we learning here? That's like trying to play Monopoly, but already owning all the hotels. Like, what's the fun? What's the game, And so instead, we forget, we drop into this physical world and we forget who we are. We forget the divine realms. We do often long for something that we once remembered that felt full of love and full of connection. We long for that. And I do believe that addiction is often really a spiritual longing for the divine realms that we can vaguely remember as these places of perfect love and connection and peace. And so our soul is longing to get out of this physical body angst. And so I don't judge an addiction because I do think it's a spiritual quest in its own way, and it might be very destructive. I think it is often destructive for that person, but if we judge it through looking at it as maybe the wrong way to have a higher connection, then we see it not as a weakness or a disease, but a beautiful soul longing for something greater than this physical world and not knowing how to experience it except through drugs or alcohol. I mean, everything here is just a soul really trying to do the best they can and maybe messing it up and not knowing how to do that. But we're all just trying to get through the day.
Wow. Robert, did you have a follow-up question or did you have a
I'm still taking in the numerology thing and a few other things. I did have a few others, but I'm still trying to remember them.
Okay,
There
fair
were so
enough.
many topics touched upon that I should have been writing things down.
Well, you
So
know what?
I
Go
can talk
ahead.
about the one path because it seems like the one path came up in your conversation. And if listeners figure out they're on that one birth path, what does that mean? Well, one is the energy of course, being a leader and a visionary. It's easy to understand that that's the energy of number one, leading us to a new way of thinking, a new way of living. However, the other piece of the one is self-doubt. I'm all alone. I'm not good enough. Nobody loves me. And so we look at it as an arc of learning on the one path where we have this really painful self-doubt. And yet when we step forward anyway with our vision, which is unique on the one path, we can change the world. We can bring new ideas to the world, but we still might go to bed at night thinking we're not good enough. It's kind of the continuum of that journey.
I love that. And I like the way you balance that out. But I think this is a really good question that I want to get to. What is a description of a soul?
I love that question. That's a beautiful question. So when we leave the body, and I have had these experiences in my life where I've traveled in the divine, and I think we all have, but it's just a matter of remembering it. But the soul is simply the being of light, you could say, that lives in the essence of us, that just put on this bodysuit for the costume of this lifetime. So I'm just wearing a costume that I put on for this lifetime, and so are you, Erica. And my costume,
yes,
I mean, we did our hair good in this costume.
yes. It's pretty good.
And yet our soul is this pure being of light that came from God consciousness, higher consciousness, and chose this journey for learning. But we're never in it just for ourselves. We are always in it for our collective soul group, our collective consciousness. So right now, these are troubled times on earth. We can agree with that, right? I mean, I'm in my 70s, and I thought the 60s were crazy, but the 60s were wonderful compared to today, you know? I mean, this is some kind of trouble we're in. And yet, if we think of it this way, where we go, collectively, we are all about to shift into love and compassion and higher wisdom here on earth. And what's it going to take for us to do that? Jesus talked about that so long ago, and we haven't done it. What if now this is a moment where all of this hatred and all of this prejudice and darkness is coming up to show us how ugly it is, so that when we get through this, we will never behave this way again here on earth. We will have finally shifted into the light, because sometimes you have to bring things to the surface to heal them. Everything has to be revealed to be healed.
Wow, wow. We have Born Rich here with us today.
How you doing, Coach Love?
How are
I love
you?
that. Born rich, boy.
Yes. Born wealthy, born wealthy. But I do want to ask you this, Sue. So when you speak about the soul and the afterlife, have you ever considered the fact that maybe when we pass away, it just fades to black? Like
Well,
nothing.
I know people do believe that, but if you've ever experienced, for example, why don't you Google near-death experience people and find out what they've experienced? And I would like you to go and visit the website of Dr. Mary Neal, Neal, I think. She's just one example. She was a surgeon, and just didn't believe in anything beyond the physical, just thought it was a fade to black experience when we died. And then she had an accident, a kayaking accident, and was clinically dead for 30 minutes. And they somehow brought her back to life, which was a miracle. And she had a clear experience that she writes about and talks about, of being lifted up by a God being and shown her life from a very loving perspective, and asked if she wanted to go back and finish her life or if she wanted to stay, and had this amazing conversation, and saw the human life as a journey of learning, and chose to come back in her body, and then had to go through a year of terrible physical suffering with all kinds of broken bones and surgery.
I've heard this story. Before.
Amazing. And the reason her story is so good is she was a physician. She was pure logic, pure left brain, didn't believe in anything. And this experience completely changed her life. And there's so many like that. And I know and I can't convince anybody else of anything. It's not my job, but I know in my heart that we are so much more than physical beings, and that my departed come back and show me all the time that this part is like school. Just do your best. Just keep trying. Try not to just drop out here. Just try. And when you leave it, you're in the great place of the divine realms, which is unconditional love, like we just don't even experience here. And I know in my cells, in my heart, that that's true. And I hope that you can go on your journey and figure out what's true for you.
I love it. I love it, Sue. I love it, Sue. Because I hear a lot of people say that, like, once we pass, you're going to either go to heaven or hell.
But you see, that tells a story that there's a punishing, judgmental God. That's not God. God is a loving God. Humans rewrote the Bible. They rewrote the parts that say that you will be sent to hell. Those are human stories. If you really go back to the original Aramaic text of the Bible, Jesus only said that he said, I give you a new commandment. It's more important than any of the others. And you know what he said, to love one another. So when you cross, you will judge your own soul. You'll see it in your soul review. You'll see who you've hurt. You'll feel the pain that you've caused others, but you'll see it in a very loving way that helps you understand it and not be crushed by it, so that you can then decide how you can help out from there or come back and try to do helping out from here. We're all in this to help each other, no matter how crazy things look down here, because we are kind of forgetting that now, but we are here to help each other. And imagine if these times that we're in, and I hate to even say it, but what if it brings our world to a crisis and we end up helping each other? That could be the point of what's happening.
That's quite amazing. This is going to sound odd, but I think it's a fair question. Do our souls ever choose to come back as something, I'm going to say like a low energy, something like a plant or a animal?
Well, I would say, by the way, I think plants and animals are highly evolved. I don't think we can call them low energy. I mean, I have had amazing,
maybe I should have said non-human. Maybe I should have said non-human.
Yeah, non-human. Well, you can measure the electromagnetic force field of plants, and they are conscious. I agree. And
yes,
animals,
they respond to singing and things of that nature. But I still want to know.
Physics says that everything is energy. Even a rock has electromagnetic field of energy around it. So grasp that idea before we ever think about what's good and what's not good, what's evolved and what's not good. I think probably cats are the most evolved souls here on Earth.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I'm just kidding.
Well, they're truly unbothered in general.
Yeah. I mean, we just have to flip how we look at things, Erica. That's what we were just talking about. You know, we think it's lowly soul to be an animal. I think they're our teachers. I think they're here to teach us love and compassion.
Well, in what you're seeing, have you seen that people would, human souls would come back as, a well,
I think there's different spiritual traditions that think of that differently, but in some traditions it's believed that those are kind of different types of beings that we have. There are different types of beings, and so certain of the animal spirit being world, very complete, as intelligent as us, but they just show up differently and have a different way of communicating and all of that. So it's not a comparative thing. It's not like they're probably in cat world going, oh my God, those humans are so dense. Don't you think? Yes.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That's that's something worth thinking about. That's for sure. That is for sure. Rich, did you have another question you wanted to throw out there?
Yes, I did. So if we're going to speak, because I think Sue is speaking about, when I hear what Sue is speaking about, I hear reincarnation. Are we saying that our spirit leaves this shell and comes back in another shell? So is that what we're saying?
If we choose to, and I want to make that very clear, because I think in some of the Eastern traditions, Buddhism and Hinduism, they paint a picture that that you're forced to come back and pay for your sins in a previous life. From what I know in my studies, that's not true. When we cross over, we leave the bodysuit and we go to the divine realms as beings of light, and we process life from there. And then we decide, hey, I'm either going to stay here in the divine realms and try to help out from here, or I may choose when I'm ready to come back in, but I will have to choose my life plan in such a way that it really helps me and others grow. Like, it's not a random thing how I'm going to come back to this world. I'm going to come back in an intentional way. And even if I am born into poverty and abuse, my soul is choosing to experience this, to push somehow, to push consciousness to grow in ways that we can't understand here with our human minds. So we have to flip how we think of all of this. It's the opposite of how it shows up.
Very interesting. So what might you choose a different gender at some point?
Of course. I mean, that's the other thing about love relationships, you know, we need to learn exactly what we're learning, but I came into a woman's body, but I've been a man in other lives, you know, and I've been all sorts of colors of skin in different lifetimes. And so there's a certain kind of learning that we're doing in each embodiment. So I think to be born a woman in these times, you know, we're trying to learn to speak our truth and own our power in ways to push awareness. And to be a man here, we're trying to learn how to use our power in the right way. If we're born on the winning team, so to speak, being a man, or especially a white man, those people are trying to learn how to be conscious and be empowering and compassionate, rather than abusing the power that they're born into. Although we aren't going to say anything about how that's going for people. Don't want to judge that, but you know, it's all a lesson. It's all part of our soul's growth. And if you're born into a certain gender and then you decide that doesn't fit, there's a part of me that wonders if maybe it's just because you remember another lifetime that you were more comfortable as a man and you chose to be a woman here, and you got here and went, oh, I don't like this bodysuit. I think I'm going to go back to being a man and not have to reincarnate. That's fine.
That leads me to a question.
Yeah, I have a question. Go ahead.
Okay, first Robert go, and then Rich, you go.
Okay. So you're telling me that as a soul, or a light being, as you say, you're without gender.
Yeah. Well, don't be upset with me, because I just
I'm not upset about it. I'm just trying to feel out if that's what you're saying.
Our true essence is without gender, but we choose to show up. Like when my departed husband Paul comes to talk to me, he shows up in his male form that I recognize. So the spirit takes the form that you know them in, you know. So if your mother comes back to give you a dream or to give you insight, she will show up as your female mom, even if in the divine realms, she's a pure being of light.
Well, let me ask you this, Sue. I like you said that. But in your dream, have you ever seen like a transsexual that came to you in your dream? I know it's going to sound weird, but have you ever seen like a transsexual that came to you in your dream and said, hey, this is your aunt. I am your aunt, Sue. Like, that's what you're saying. You're saying that you can come back genderless, or you can come back as the person I remember. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, I think we're all getting into the details, and who knows, you know, I mean, I'm not in charge of all this, but from my personal experience, souls, even when they show up, you know, right after they've crossed, you can feel this shimmering quality to them. So I'll give you a story. So for example, my best girlfriend, Chrissy, had been my best girlfriend all through grade school. We kind of got each other through our childhoods together. And right after my husband, Paul, died of cancer, she was diagnosed with leukemia. And I often tell people, Paul's death, I could get through that. You know, he had been my husband, but Chrissy's death, she had been like my sister, you know, from the time I could remember, the person I processed everything with and talked to all the time. And when she died, a very painful death, of leukemia in 1981, that's when I really wanted to give up. I was angry at God, you know, angry at this universe where things like this could happen. So Chrissy came to me in a dream. She came to me in a lot of dreams. The night she died, I was in Mexico and she had been in California, and her cancer had been in remission, but that I didn't know. The time I was in Mexico, she had gone into a coma. And so one night in Mexico, I had no internet, no phone. It was 1981. Chrissy came to me and in a dream was making me laugh all night. And she looked healthy and young and shimmering with this gold quality of energy. And she was like, so, you know, she was just taking me and showing me things and like traveling with me and making me laugh the way she always made me laugh when she was my best friend. And I was laughing with Chrissy so hard all night that my stomach muscles hurt. You know how your stomach hurts when you laugh a lot? And I would wake up in the middle of the night and go, this is weird. I'm having a dream with Chrissy. And then I'd go back to sleep and it would still continue. And in the morning, I woke up going, God, I was with Chrissy all night. Like I could smell her. I felt her. I knew I'd been with her. And it had this shimmery golden quality to the experience. And so I went, oh my God, I wonder if she's crossed over, if she's died. And I went and had to get a phone call through to the States and then to her family, and took a while. And finally I got in touch with her family, and she had died in a coma that night. And she had come to me right away to show me that she was this shimmering gold essence of joy. And she was taking me around and showing me these things that made me laugh. You just have to embrace the mystical, because there's no explaining how she just took me on a journey of laughing all night to the point where my stomach muscles hurt on the night that she left her body. But it really happened.
What a joy. All right, fellas, do you have any closing questions? I think you may have rendered them speechless. Oh my goodness.
I got one. All right. We'll close it out with this, Coach Love and Sue.
Okay.
So Sue, let me ask you this. So the spirit realm, right? Okay, well, let me say it like this. I think that the current stratosphere or atmosphere that we're in now is ruled and totally dominated by white supremacy. Is the spirit realm controlled by white supremacy?
Oh my God.
Is that free from white supremacy?
Oh, sweetheart, no. Anybody who carries hatred or discrimination in their heart is not acting from God consciousness. No, these are people who are lost, who totally forgot that they're a divine being. They are separated from their God consciousness, and they call themselves Christians, which is a big laugh, because all Jesus ever said was love one another. And you know, the fact that white supremacy is coming up now as a thing, it astounds me, because I don't want to talk about this in a weird way, but Martin Luther King was my hero. And I was in high school in Mobile, Alabama. He spoke in Mobile, Alabama. And I thought we had learned what we were trying to learn about prejudice. And here it is, worse than ever. And the only way I can look at this spiritually is to say that deep, dark prejudice, hatred has been living in the underbelly of humanity for so long. And nothing can be healed unless it's revealed. And so this is a time in culture and history where the ugliness of the human journey is coming to the surface, dressed as white supremacy and all that hatred, all that awful stuff, so that the God-loving consciousness that we all hold in our hearts can somehow purify and shift all of this with love. I'm not talking about a war. I'm talking about with higher consciousness. So we have to be, in spite of how awful this all looks, we have to try to find love in our hearts, not hatred, or we are in some ways acting like they are, because they're just holding hatred in their hearts.
Wow. That was a powerful last question, Rich. Robert, do you have a last question?
No, I think she pretty much covered everything.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Sue and I are going to wrap it up here. You know, I told her that I was only going to keep her for so long. It's getting pretty late, but Sue, I still have a long list of questions that I could keep going. Really, I could probably.
Well, Coach Eric, I have never enjoyed a conversation as much as this one. You're awesome.
Oh, well,
And
thank you.
so are your people here.
Yes,
who've
you
been
know what?
asking us
We are a curious crew, but we're based in love. So that's just
I
kind
love
of,
it.
yeah, that's kind of how we roll. I'm going to keep you for a minute. So hang
Okay.
backstage. Did you have any last words that you
I
wanted
just
to
want to say thank you all so much. I've loved your questions. I've loved your conversations, and you've opened my heart so much. So I just hold you all in so much love, and thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. And family, thank you so much for spending time with us. It has been a double header kind of night, hasn't it been fabulous? I hope Sue comes back and hangs out with us again, because I must tell you, I still have questions. I still have things that I want to know. One of the things I want to know is, what kind of conversations does she have with, atheists? I want to talk more about soul regression and being a ordained a unity minister. I just have questions upon questions, and we didn't even really dig into her books. There's so much more to know. So guys, we have to have her back. Let's just officially recognize her as one of us, a true thunder heart, someone who is curious about life and seeking true epic understanding. But alas, my dear loves, it is getting late and it is time to go. So I must simply say, what, guys? Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye. You're winning. You're winning. You're winning.